Okay, hello and welcome to the fourth episode of season 3 of Conservation Conversations with BirdLife South Africa. I'm your host, Andrew de Blok, coming to you live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Welcome back to all of our regular viewers and a special big hello to any new viewers tuning in for the first time to Conservation Conversations. Tonight's show is the first in a new series exploring the great birding to be had around South Africa's major cities. This month, Toyota South Africa Motors have generously sponsored Conservation Conversations. BirdLife South Africa and Toyota have a proud partnership together that focuses on protecting our wetlands and the threatened birds who live in them, such as the critically endangered white-winged flufftail. Through a collaboration with Randwater's Waterwise, Joburg City Parks and Zoo, as well as the Pick and Pay School Club and Pick and Pay People and Planet, Toyota was able to assist us in producing this year's Flufftail Festival Wetland Warrior Activity Book. This great resource is available for download on the BirdLife South Africa website and is a great way to teach primary school children about water, wetlands, and waterbird conservation. So thank you to Toyota South Africa Motors. Now, so many of you have donated over the last few years to keep these webinars free for everyone to learn and enjoy. Every little bit does help, and we really do appreciate your support. You can visit the Phuket page or EFT BirdLife South Africa directly and use the reference webinars and your name, and then you'll pick up that donation. So thank you to all of you who've supported us over the years. So that's enough of announcements. Let's get into tonight's webinar. We're kicking off a new series of episodes on Conservation Conversations tonight. Regular viewers will remember the perennially popular series we ran on birding in national parks last year. These are still some of our best attended episodes and also some of our most watched recordings on our YouTube channel. We heard your feedback about the appetite for more birding themed webinars, and we're very excited to announce our new AV tourism focus series, which will zoom in on the birding opportunities in and around South Africa's major cities. On the first Tuesday of every month, going forward until the end of the year, we will be joined by residents of a different city who will enlighten us on the best birding to be had in their hometowns. Kicking off the series tonight will be Mike Buckham and David Winter, who will be taking us on a tour of the mother city. Mike and Dave are stalwarts of the birding scene in Cape Town and in South Africa as well. Many of you will know them as the joint hosts of the popular webinar series, Better Birding, where they've unpacked complicated identification conundrums, they've featured special guests, and even toured some fantastic birding destinations. Tonight, they're representing Cape Town on our tour of South Africa's major cities. Cape Town, as many of you will know, was home for me until my move to Johannesburg about 2.5 years ago. So I'm very eager to reminisce with these two good friends of mine about some of the incredible birding to be had there. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Mike and Dave to the Conservation Conversations platform. And with that, I invite you to unmute yourself, share your presentation with us, and take it away, Mike and Dave. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Andrew, and quick welcome to everybody. Lots of familiar names that are coming through in the chat box. So great to see all those familiar names, and great to be presenting to Conservation Conversations. Apologies. I think everybody does that.
Bit of a tongue twister.
Dave, nice to be sitting in the chair next to you doing a webinar.
Yeah, it's been a while, Mike. Thanks for having us, Andrew. I think you probably could have given this webinar yourself. So please do chime in if we get anything wrong. But yeah. Let's get going.
Let's get going. So we've stopped our video. We think you'd prefer to look at the beautiful sights of Cape Town and the wonderful birds rather than our two ugly mugs, well, at least one ugly mug. So we will kick off with this great shot of Table Mountain from Signal Hill. This is our backyard, and it's a place that we're very proud of as birders. I've been in Cape Town since I was 18 years old, and in the bio it said that I realize that Cape birding is actually better than Gauteng birding, but I'll be careful what I say because we've got a lot of people from up north listening in. So it's a difficult topic trying to fit everything in. The first thing we'd like to present is to basically say, well, you know, why would you want to go birding in Cape Town? And we're talking to obviously a lot of South African birders as well as international birders, and we've just picked a few key points. Cape Town's got great roads, good infrastructure. We've got diverse and open habitats. So not a lot of forest birding here, which can be quite tough. Most of the birding here is pretty easy, Dave. I think you would attest to that. Lots of fynbos type of stuff and Strandfontein.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, I guess the Western Cape, but particularly Cape Town, has amazing levels of endemism. And I mean, you mentioned at the bottom there complementary activities. If you're traveling with your family, I mean, if you want to convince your family to go and find red lark in Poffer or Brunflay, you might have quite a tough job. But if you're looking for Cape Sugarbird or Cape Siskin around Cape Town, I think it'll be an easier sell. It's an amazing city, obviously, just from a tourist, but also from a birding perspective. It really does tickle the boxes.
Absolutely. Table Mountain, the waterfront. I mean, Kirstenbosch Gardens is not only a birding site, it's a great site for scenery.
Exactly.
And Cape Town is generally a safe city. So we're going to talk a little bit about safety as we go. And I think that's a key factor when picking a birding spot. Cape Town is generally safe, but there is always the needs to be aware of where you are. And we've tried to pick sites that are relatively safe and have a good track record of that. There are some really good birding sites in Cape Town which are not safe, and we've tried to stay away from those. Right, so we had a difficult time trying to pick a limited number of sites that we can cover in a shortish sort of period of time. So we've chosen 4 main sites, and then we'll talk about a few additional sites. So why did we pick the ones that we did? We've tried for easily accessible and safe sites, sites that will give you a good diversity of species and offer you those endemic species as well. And we wanted places that were easy to bird on foot or in the safety of your car or in the comfort of your car. So not a lot of hiking involved. There are some sites that will require lots of hard slog. We chose ones that didn't require that. And we've tried to package it in a way where you can do half day and full day trips and days. Just going to mention some of that aspect in a second. And we figure that the 4 sites we've picked will give you a very large coverage of the species you could expect to see in Cape Town. So I reckon of the 150 to 200 species in the Cape Town area, I reckon in 2 or 3 days, you're going to get pretty much most of those, particularly if you're coming in summer. Right, so what are our sites? We picked Kirstenbosch National Botanical Gardens. We going with Strandfontein, and we've got a site which may not be as familiar, which is Macasa Dunes Conservation Area. People will know that as a site where bed sandpiper has been hanging about. And then we've actually picked Rooi Els, which is quite far from Cape Town, relatively speaking, but can be an amazing half-day outing from a place like the waterfront.
Yeah, Mike, I think if you are focused on endemics, particularly if you haven't been to Cape Town before, Rooi Els just really adds that really sort of step up in the endemics you can find. I think what's great about these sites as well is if you look at Kirstenbosch and Strandfontein, you can quite easily do those in the morning together if you're quite focused, and then you could do Macasa and Rooi Els in a full day. So I think they complement each other quite nicely. Or you could just pick one and just sort of do it on its own. Yeah.
And what you'll notice is that Kirstenbosch and Rooi Els are our high endemism sites with relatively low diversity, and then Strandfontein and Macasa are high diversity, lots of birds, and also lots of rarity potential. So let's kick off with Kirstenbosch. And I think the most important thing to say is that this is basically both Dave and my back garden. I live maybe 2 kilometers from Kirstenbosch, and Dave, I think, is even closer. As much as it's my backyard, Dave, maybe you can tell us about how it genuinely was your backyard as you were growing up.
Yeah, Mike, I was very privileged to actually grow up in Kirstenbosch. My dad was the curator of the gardens for, I think, 36 years. So I was born there and I lived there for 24 years. And yeah, I was very privileged. So I had that view of Castle Rock from my bedroom window, and I would hear wood owls and fire-necked nightjars often in summer. And I'm probably one of the few people who can say they've got Cape Gannet on their Kirstenbosch list.
Really? When was that?
After a big storm.
Okay.
I was phoned from the main office and said, please come identify this bird, and it was a juvenile Cape Gannet.
Wow, that's probably is a one and only record.
Mm.
So what we've done with each of the sites is we've tried to give a few logistics, just in how to get there, where to go, how long it takes. We're going to not spend too much time on logistics. They're on the screen. Kirstenbosch is a comfortable drive from the waterfront. You can easily take a taxi there or an Uber. Or you can even get on one of the red buses. So the tourist red buses, one of their stops is Kirstenbosch, and it's a great way to spend a morning from the waterfront if that's where you're staying. And we recommend you can do Kirstenbosch spinning around there in an hour, but 2 to 4 hours is the recommended time we would suggest.
I think what's also cool about the site, Mike, is that you can go there on your own, whereas the other sites you probably want to go with a friend or family or but you can, as you say, you can jump in a taxi, you can get there quickly, you can even spend an hour, hour and a half there and have a great time.
Yeah, and I think that comes to our comment about very safe. I think it is one of those sites in Cape Town that I would feel very comfortable sending my own mother there on her own.
Yeah.
And so it's got very comfortable amenities. We've put up the chart of the costs. And just to make a comment on the opening times, the main gates, and we'll talk about the main gates are open from sort of 8:30, I think. Yeah. But if you've got a Botanical Society card, which is a very good investment, you can access at the top gate or the Rycroft gate. You can access from as early in the morning as you want. So from first light. I've often been in there at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, particularly in summer. All right, so what do the gardens look like? That's a photo from one of the curated sections of the garden. There's gardens, there's walkways, there's the boomslang, there's mountain fynbos, and there's obviously some indigenous sort of Afro-montane forests. And that in itself delivers a whole bunch of species. The amenities are plentiful restaurants, toilets, coffee shops, bookshops. So nothing that you'll go short of, and you have no reason to worry that you'll miss out on anything. Fitness levels, you can be completely unfit and you can enjoy wandering around the lower sections. If you want to get up into the mountain fynbos and hike up one of the gorges, you need to be a little bit fitter. It's absolutely wheelchair friendly from all the entrance areas, the parking. So it's a wonderful site. Kirstenbosch is one of the country's real treasures. And for us as birders, it's a treasure because of the birds it has. And as we mentioned, we're talking about a site that has huge endemism. So these are birds that occur in South Africa or Southern Africa exclusively. And international birders, when coming to a country, want to see the endemics. And there's no better place to start than Kirstenbosch. And a lot of those endemics are really easy. Cape Spurfowl is ubiquitous. Cape Bulbul, really easy to find. Karoo Prinia, they're all within earshot as you walk through the gate. Some of the more iconic birds, Cape Sugarbird is without a doubt one of South Africa's most iconic endemic birds. Here's one male sitting on the Lupus spermum, and their calls are always to be heard in the upper sections. And Dave's going to take us through a little bit of a walkthrough. But it's a wonderful bird. It's also an endemic family to Southern Africa, which makes it even more special. This is a crowd pleaser of the highest order, orange-breasted sunbird. It's such an attractive bird, and it's really common in the gardens, particularly when you hear its sort of metallic clinking call. So it's good to get onto that, but they really are quite showy. It's not like birding in some deep dark forests where the birds are hard to find. Have you got a new
camera, Mike? Because these photos are amazing.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I do have a new camera, and it's generally all related to how good the equipment is that you have, not the quality of the photography.
It's obviously skill. These really are phenomenal.
And then another endemic. What we've done is we've put a little E for birds that are endemic, and that just helps you know what are the really special birds in all the sites that we speak about. So forest canary is an endemic. It's interesting. It wasn't a common bird in the gardens sort of 20 years ago, but they really are full up there. And Dave, we were talking earlier, it's a bird that is probably most easily seen in Kirstenbosch.
Definitely the best site. When I was growing up, I mean, they just started to come to the garden, and funny enough, my actual garden around my house was a good spot for them. And then slowly over the last sort of 20 years, they've increased in abundance.
In name, they're forest canaries, but you really do see them just about any habitats in the gardens.
I actually once, funny story, I was asleep one morning. I think it was midweek. I was sort of getting up for school, and I heard this car come down the road, and a very prominent ornithologist who was obviously guiding a foreign client was walking down my driveway into my garden, and I obviously ran outside to go, what the hell? Awesome, what are you doing here? And he said sheepishly that he was looking for forest canary.
Okay. So it's amazing. I mean, that's how special Kirstenbosch is that bird guides take their clients there to see these special birds that we sometimes just take a little bit for granted. So lemon dove is one of the forest birds. It's exclusively a forest bird. It's most easily seen in the boomslang area, and you generally pick it up by rummaging through the leaf litter. And it's one of those birds, you sometimes see 6 of them under the boomslang, and other days you can't find any, but really, really pretty dove and nice to see.
They're also amazing because they can be incredibly tame. So I remember when you first found them in the gardens, the birds we found actually quite high up in the forest. It's only lately that they seem to have actually moved into the more kind of, I guess, developed part of the garden. But I mean, you can get within a meter or 2 of them. I remember showing Claire Spottiswoode her first lemon dove, and it literally was at our feet.
All right, brown-backed honeybird is a tough bird to find just about anywhere, but if you're going to look for it in Cape Town, the gardens is the place. And we get great raptors. So Dave, you're a raptor fundi. I think you use Kirstenbosch as your base for great peninsular raptor watching.
Yeah, I think it's very underrated as a raptor spot, and actually not really something that people are very aware of. But I mean, I've had mornings at Kirstenbosch where I've had 12, 13 species of raptor, from common buzzard, jackal buzzard, forest buzzard, European honey buzzard, the accipiters, so rufous-breasted, black sparrowhawk, African goshawk, even an African harrierhawk breeds in the area. It's common. Fish eagle, young fish eagles flying over, peregrine falcon.
Booted eagle as well is a good bird to get in summer seasons.
Yeah.
So plenty of raptors. Rock kestrel obviously is one that we see around.
Residents, well. Yeah, exactly.
And tell us about the very rare falcon that you've seen in Kirstenbosch. Okay?
I am the second person to record Eleanor's falcon in Kirstenbosch. John Graham was the first.
So most people wouldn't believe that, but you've actually got a photograph.
I do, yeah.
Amazing. I dream of sightings like that in Kirstenbosch. And then olive woodpecker, also a relatively recent colonizer in the garden, but they're easily seen around the boomslang in the forested sections, and they're always a popular bird to see. So Dave, we're just going to ask you to maybe, just given your knowledge of the gardens and the route that you usually take, just take our viewers through what you would do if you're approaching Kirstenbosch on a summer's morning.
Cool. So the three circles obviously represent the entrances, and I usually go in the top entrance, so the top circle. That is the main entrance. You can also go in the middle one, or the top gate or the Rycroft gate, which Mike mentioned. I find the top one you can get access to birding habitat the quickest. You're sort of almost in the forest immediately. We're in the more developed parts of the garden. It's also just got lots of parking, so it's really easy. Top gate or the Rycroft gate at the bottom also get you into good habitat, particularly the Famble section really quickly, but there's sort of limited parking.
Maybe we can just clarify for everyone why we're calling it top gate when it's actually showing the bottom of the slide.
Yes.
Top gate is the highest altitudes gate of Kirstenbosch.
Yeah.
So it's generally a gate that you access if you want to get to the upper slopes quickest.
I think it's more commonly known as Rycroft gate. Yeah, but I sort of locally mentioned called a top gate. And then in terms of routes, so I started at top parking lot, and I generally do a sort of a clockwise route. I go there most weekends with my kids, and they sort of charge around, and I sort of chase after them and bird as I go. But if you head just below that big parking lot, there's a nice marshy area there where you can get things like little rush warbler, Levalon cisticola, speckled mousebird, and
Sweet waxbills.
Yeah.
And bronze manakins have colonized in the sort of southern suburbs of Cape Town.
Exactly. There's actually a little, I guess it's a seep.
Yeah.
There's a little pond where those two species often drink. And then I head towards the Beta E Cafe up Camphor Avenue. And then you sort of move around in the southern parts up into the Protea section. And that's really where you get the endemics that you're looking for. So Cape Sugarbird. You can get Cape Siskin irregularly. It's best to listen for their sort of fluty song or call. You can also, obviously, Mike, you mentioned Cape Spurfowl is common. There's also quite a well-known nesting site for spotted eagle owl. So it's what's also nice about the garden, they have some quite well-known nesting sites for spotted eagle owls. And if there isn't an obvious one, it's often quite a good idea to ask the staff if they know of a site where they're breeding. So the light green circles are, I guess, the more developed parts of the garden. And then the blue circles are where you'll find, I guess, the forest species. So those middle two circles, the bottom one represents the boomslang. That's where you'll see lemon dove. But you'll also see African paradise flycatcher and Cape Batis. Both of them breed in those areas. The top blue circle is the Braille Trail. So that's an area of the garden where historically we used to get Neisner warbler, which is, I guess, a bit of a sad story. But the garden before it was, I guess, so manicured, had lots of sort of bramble and thicket. But over the last, I guess, 20, 30 years, they've cleared a lot of that out. But the Neisner warbler used to, I mean, as a schoolboy, I have very fond memories of watching, singing Neisner warblers in the Dell or on that Braille Trail. So they're sort of locally quite common. And also just beware, so there is a little rush warbler that lives in that wetland as well, and their songs are quite similar. But yeah, unfortunately, Neisner warblers, we think, are probably extinct on the peninsula, but there have been one or two records.
Skeleton Gorge.
Exactly.
So, I mean, just the one other bird to mention, in this Dell section about 2 years ago, there was a very friendly buff-spotted fluff-tailed pair, and they came and bathed in the river, and a lot of people in the Cape. We don't get them so easily here in Cape Town, but they were quite obliging. And interestingly, this is quite a walk to get up into Nursery Ravine, and the forested sections up on the slopes are not as productive as down in the gardens. And I think it's just a case of where the most accessible food is. So these sections of the garden are more worthwhile. So I think that kind of wraps up a morning in Kirstenbosch, Dave. I think we've mentioned most of the species.
Maybe just one last comment, Mike. I mean, you mentioned, I think it's definitely, if you can get in early, you can beat the crowds. Yeah. You'll generally find that there are less people in the garden as you go higher up. So the steeper sections of the garden, you'll find less people. And if you go in early, because the sun rises in the east, you can actually get great light for photography. Yeah. And Mike, I mean, you've had many,
absolutely,
both of us, that's fantastic.
Wonderful mornings in Kirstenbosch.
Yeah. And
I mean, just for those that don't know, this is where they have the summer concerts, which hopefully will be returning, given our COVID scenario. And if you want to go birding in Kirstenbosch, don't go on a summer concert evening. No. You'll be overrun by concert goers. So let's maybe move on. And what we've done is we've just picked a very nice associated site, and we won't spend too much time on it. But there's a little parking lot called Cecilia Forest Car Park, and this is all it used to be very much a plantation, a pine plantation. They've now started clearing. There's a lot of fynbos, and that's quite a useful site. And it really is, I contend that it's the best site in the world for Cape Siskin. Cape Siskin's not an easy endemic in most parts of the fynbos, but I am pretty comfortable that I can show most people at Cape Siskin in certain sections of Cecilia Forest. It's also a very good spot. I'll come back to Cape Siskin site in a second. But it's also a very good spot for common chaffinch. And we saw in the chat room, someone was specifically asking for chaffinch. Chaffinch is more common, I think, in Takai, but they really are common birds now. And if you just know their little metallic clinking contact call, or their sort of descending song, particularly in spring or summer, it's not a difficult bird to find, particularly as they fly away with all that white in their wings. So really a pretty bird, and a nice one to see. So just if you park in Cecilia Forest, you can easily find it on a Google map. There's a little trail that walks up here, and it's this very quiet sort of cross trail. These red circle areas, particularly these gum trees, there's some very, very large gums. You'll hear the siskins calling there, but they feed in these sort of fynbos sections. They like eating from the seeds, and we see flocks of 30, 40 Cape Siskin. There's actually a telephone wire that goes across this section of the garden, of the slope, and you see 10 of them sitting on the wire. So really a good spot for Cape Siskin.
The best way to find them is the call.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Listen up for the call.
Yeah. So they got quite a few variations. It's a very canary-like call, but once you get that nasal sort of siskin call, yeah, it's quite easy. And that's that particular trail, which is not that well used, and we use it very regularly for raptor watches, and you can see why. It looks out onto the mountain, and we've seen many, many good raptors from that side.
So all the birds I mentioned at Kirstenbosch, you could see at Cecilia as well.
Yeah. All right, just in the interest of time, let's keep moving on. We could talk about Kirstenbosch forever, but let's move on to the next most amazing site, and that's Strandfontein. We're going to just go through the logistics very quickly. From the waterfront, you can see I did this map when the traffic was very bad. It does not take 48 minutes on your normal days. It's probably a half an hour to 40-minute drive from the waterfront, and it is very justifiably considered one of the best birding spots in the country, I guess. It needs about 2 to 4 hours. So we say it's safe. Just bear in mind that there have been some incidents, particularly on the western side of the works, and we can just point that out when we show a map. It's the side where the big city dump is, and there are some broken fences and people have come through, but they've worked so hard at safety subsequent to those incidents. And I must say it's been pretty incident-free for the last sort of few years.
Whenever you go near there now, there's a very, I guess, clear security presence, and you never feel vulnerable. But I guess like any birding site in this country, I think you always just need to be aware. You can't be too caught up in what you're doing. You always need to be aware of your surroundings.
And don't go alone.
Yeah, but if there are people who look a bit shady, then you just need to
drive away.
Yeah.
So Strandfontein is very specifically a site that requires driving around in a car, because the settling ponds, to get around all of them, it's quite a large distance, but it's very easy driving. It's flats. Don't go to the southern sections where there's a lot of soft sand, because your car will get stuck. But yeah, you can get out of your car just about, well, you can get out of your car anyway, and you can walk along the edges of the pans and take great photos. There are toilets and picnic sites, but those are more towards the Sequoia side. In the actual works themselves, it's not that easy to find a spot to go to the toilet, so make sure you provision for that. Fitness level, you don't need to be fit to go to Strandfontein, certainly not. So what are the birds that we see? I mean, there's just tons, 80 to 100 species on a summer morning. And, you know, great birds like black-necked grebe, which are not common in too many places, great crested grebe, ibises, flamingos are a real feature. If you go into Strandfontein and you just, I take a lot of new birders there, and you go there and you show them these sort of 500, 600 flamingos in the pans. I just can't believe it's something we can see so close to Cape Town.
Like the thing for me about Strandfontein is it's a real birding experience. It's just you're not seeing endemics, but you're just seeing literally thousands and thousands of birds, and it's constantly changing. There always seem to be birds coming and going. You can go one day and see 10,000 terns, and go the next day and you'll see 10.
Yeah.
There's always birds sort of moving in and moving out. It's obviously strategically, it's an important feeding and roosting site for lots of birds. So there are always birds on the go, there's always movement. It's just a fantastic birding experience.
It's so interesting. I was there with a new birding mate yesterday evening. And we stopped the car, and he got out of the car and he just looked at, we were at P1, which is one of the good pans at the moment. And he just couldn't believe the number of birds. There must have been 400 pied sets, 200 black-necked stilts, gulls, terns. It was really amazing. So just a few of the other birds. It's a great wader site. Okay? And the waders are very, very dependent on conditions. So we've had a few tough years from a wader perspective, mostly because of the drought. A lot of the pans dried up in the drought, and it bleached out all the nutrients. So as the pans have filled over the last 2 or 3 years, it's taken some time for that I guess the stuff that the waders feed on, it's taken a while for those to come back. But the waders are returning, and depending on the water levels, you get great stuff. Pteric sandpiper, ironically, is not a common bird there, but this was photographed at Strandfontein, and it's an amazing bird too. We rushed down there when we heard there's a pteric there, because it's a great. I keep a very strict Strandfontein list. I compete heavily against some of the big hitters.
I've noticed, Mike.
So, and then we've got the waterfowl. Bluebill teal is a wonderful bird. Used to be quite a rarity. We've got quite a few of them. Purple swamp hen is just fantastic as well. And then adjoining the pans, there's Strandfontein. There's a section of Strandfontein, and Dave's going to show us the actual sites. But birds like greyback, testicular, and Karoo scrub robin are both endemic, and it's amazing to actually go to a place like Strandfontein, which is waterbird focused, and get into the Strandfontein where you get yellow canaries, chestnut-vented warblers, blue-cheek beaters were around this last season. So a great variety of birds. And then it's rarity central. So these are just 4 birds that we've seen over the years. It was the first site of elegant tern in Southern Africa. It was actually, I think, the second record for the continent. And I was lucky enough to see that one. It's not this particular bird, but pectoral sandpiper, we get them quite regularly. We've had a good season for them now. Franklin's gull are relatively regular rarities. And then Temming stint was the first Temming stint in, I think, 25 years. So created a lot of buzz. That one Saturday morning, Dave, I don't remember it.
That was a Strandfontein purple patch of note.
It was like being at an amusement park. There was a Temming stint. There was a spotted crake. There was American golden plover. There was a phalarope, redneck phalarope, and there was a peck sand. And people were moving from one side to another between P1 and P2, and it was there was like a real buzz. If you weren't at Strandfontein that morning, then you were nowhere.
It might also have been because we just started the Strandfontein challenge.
We did a Strandfontein challenge one year with a bunch of mates, and Dave and I were not in the upper echelons of that challenge.
And Andrew, in fact, was also part of that that crew.
We were quite a long way ahead of Andrew, I think.
I wasn't.
Right, Dave, I think just take us through, this is the entrance section to the works, and that's actually not Strandfontein, that's Sequoia. So Dave, maybe just talk about some of the sites as you come in.
Yeah, so this is a flay which is north of the actual works itself. So you would enter that red circle, you drive south down that sort of that green line. There's a whole bunch of eucalypts which run along that road, and it's worth driving along there. You get African dusty flycatcher, you get willow warbler occasionally in summer, which is quite last night. Yeah, which is quite scarce for Cape Town. And it's just a nice gentle introduction to birding at Strandfontein.
Interestingly, chaffinch as well.
Yes,
You see them in that
true. And then you can also look out across Sewerage to these other reed beds across the way. I generally don't spend too much time here. I focus on, there's also grassland along this road. So when there was an open-board stalk eruption, there were a whole bunch of them along there, but they're often good, I guess, swallow flocks feeding, sitting cisticola, black-headed herons feeding, the odd jackal buzzard.
We've had banded marten
exactly
in those fields as well.
Yeah.
All right, and then this is the true works, and I think this is where Dave, just take us through the focus areas when you come into Strandfontein, because I think it can be confusing for new birders.
Sure, I think it's useful. So that red circle represents the southern end of Sewerage, which is the previous slide. So you would drive down that road and to that circle, that point. You would drive in next to P7, and then I would concentrate. So I mean, I think Mike's divided the works up quite nicely. P1 and P2 are really the areas where I would focus. Those are pans that generally aren't that deep. They're quite shallow. So you have great roosting sites and excellent diversity of birds, from generally large flocks of gulls and terns and reed-dwelling species, avocets, black-winged stilts. It really is a high concentration of birds. Then as you move south, you get slightly sort of deeper pans where you get more sort of wildfowl, waterfowl. And then you get the yellow area, which Mike has circled S7, S4. Those lately have been quite clogged with water hyacinth, which is a shame. So I wouldn't spend too much time there. And also the roads that hug Baden-Powell Drive are also quite sandy. So there is a risk there of getting stuck in the sand. And then that right-hand yellow circle is where you find all the Strandfontein species. It can be quite tricky to get there though.
Yeah, there's this particular road, you can see where it goes north here. This road here is now pretty difficult to get through from a sand perspective. So you have to park and then generally walk up into the Strandfontein. You used to be able to access it from the north, but it's also not, it's a very isolated section of the works. I've never had a problem there though, to be honest, but it's just an area that you should be aware of. There are probably better sites close to Cape Town to get the Strandfontein birds, but it just does show you what kind of a site it is.
It's good for your atlas card if you want to add a bit of diversity there.
So this was the dump I was talking about earlier, and this was the section that was a little bit vulnerable from a safety point of view. It's definitely improved, but just be aware. I mean, just this P1, P2, the number of rarities. This was the Temming stint hotspot. There was a phalarope in this pan. The golden plover was about here. The spotted crake was here. So it was really, this is where a lot of the action happens. We've had an Allen's gallinule in this little triangle here as well. The bed sandpiper that was around for a while was down at pan S8 and then moved to S2. So it's just it's an area where every time you go, you have this buzz, like what are we going to see today? And when I go there with my birding son, we always fantasize about birds that we're going to find. And we had an interesting experience with a buzzard that turned out to be a very pale jackal buzzard, but it looked like a redneck buzzard. And we had everybody on speed dial trying to find out and sending photos. But it's the kind of place where you don't ignore things that are exciting, because they generally can be.
Mike, I often, if I've got a couple of hours in an afternoon, I can get to Strandfontein in about 20 minutes, and I'll often just concentrate on P1 and P2 because that's where a lot of the good birding is. It really is a great site for that. I mean, I think one can expect. I mean, I've notched up over 100 species in a day at Strandfontein. So you really can build up a decent list. It just shows that, I guess, the diversity of the site. When you drive around, there's the verges of the road are quite grassy. You can see things like Ornithorhynchus longclaw, Cape longclaw, African pipits.
We had a plainback pipit down there. John Graham was with us, and he found a plainback pipit, first record for Strandfontein. So anything's possible. Lots of western yellow whitetails over the years. And citrine whitetail. That's another one that I forgot to mention.
So I mean, for me, if someone's visiting Cape Town, Strandfontein would be definitely top of the list. It's definitely a site that you have to visit along with Kirstenbosch, but it's definitely a must-visit site.
Yeah, I mean, if you go with someone who knows, you can do Kirstenbosch and Strandfontein easily in the morning. But if you're on your own and it's the first time you've been into Cape Town, you really want to soak it up a little bit more than that. You don't want to rush through a place like Strandfontein.
Yeah, and just a tip. If you are going, I recommend Googling before you go. If you search for images in Google, search for Strandfontein map, and it'll show you the numbers of the pans and exactly where to go. it's quite important to know which pans you're looking at, but P1 and P2 are definitely where we'd recommend concentrating.
Yeah, particularly if you find a rarity, and you need to tell Trevor. You need to tell him which pan it's on, so you should know which pan you're at.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of Strandfontein in a nutshell. It's very hard to do Strandfontein in a short space of time, but I think everyone's been given a good perspective of it. Just an amazing birding spot. Okay, so we're going to move now, Dave, to a spot that I think is probably very, I guess, poorly known by most Southern African birders. It's a relatively new site. It's always been there, obviously, but it has had safety concerns in the past. And we're talking about the Macasa Dune Conservation Area, which is just a fraction to the west of the Strand, which is a suburb of sort of Eastern Cape Town. And the really, really exciting thing is our good friend Cliff Dorse works for the city, and they are going to be proclaiming a nature reserve here at Macasa. So in the past, it's been a spot that you shouldn't go to on your own. But once they've sort of proclaimed it, I think there's going to be a lot more energy put into actually conserving the area and making sure that there's safety is looked after.
Mike, I think if you think about it in the context of conservation, it's quite unusual to have a relatively pristine river sort of estuarine habitat in a city that is tidal. So I mean, it's open to the sea. If you think about all the other major rivers that flow into the sea, they're often clogged up or sanded up. So actually, it's a fantastic site from a sort of ecosystem perspective. Yeah,
Dave, I think that's a very good point. I mean, if you think Milnerton Lagoon and the Riflay area, that's a very nice system as well. But I think because of the nature of the rivers that flow in there, it's quite a lot of pollution.
Yeah.
Whereas this river that flows out into the sea at Macasa tends to be, I think, a little bit healthier. And I mean, you can just see from this image that Cliff sent me, you just see the number of birds there, and you get a good mix of coastal species. You can take a scope there. You can see things like jaegers chasing the terns.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful site. Maybe just to deal with the logistics, it's actually Dave visited there last weekend and said it's amazing how quick it is to get there. So
it's 30 minutes.
It's 35 minutes on the N2. And once you're off the N2, it's actually a very easy little detour. So even if you're kind of leaving the city early one morning and you want to do a quick visit into Macasa, it really works quite well. So we've said safety, you need to be a little bit cautious. We think 2 to 3 hours. There's nothing that you have to pay. It's obviously a free site. And that's just a very good image to show you why the city is proclaiming it as a nature reserve. It's just this pristine Strandveld. So there's plenty of great birds. Greybacks and sticklers are full up here. Lots of great birds. So aside from the potential rarity value in the wetland stuff, it really has got some pristine Strandveld. There's a few more images. That actually is the entrance bridge. And this river, weirdly, is a great place to stop for things like Cape Bulbul and Bar-throated Apellis and Southern Master Weaver and things like that. So as you're driving in, particularly if you're doing an Atlas card, like we so often do. All right, so let's just go through. I'll take us through this one. The entrance over here, it's a little bit of an awkward entrance, but it's at the site over here. And
it's actually kind of next to the main, so it's up it's up the gate into the works. It's actually alongside.
Yeah, so as you approach the works, the main tar road goes kind of it veers left into the I guess the sewerage works themselves, whereas the actual road to the settling pans are on the right-hand side along the fence. And once you come through there, you drive down this road, and I think your target is this area over here. So huge number of birds that roost on these mud flats. This would be the first area to look for, and great in the afternoon, unlike some sites where are really good in the morning. If you come here in the afternoon and the sun's coming from the west, you get a great view of these reed beds and this sort of mud flat. This is the little mud flat here where the bed sandpiper, there's actually 2 of them up here, are hanging around at the moment. So a great rarity. The settling ponds are just typical settling ponds, a few red-knobbed coots and a few yellow-billed ducks. But what ends up happening is you get tons of roosting terns and gulls. And obviously the waders along the shoreline, but terns and gulls roost on these sandbanks, and depending on the tides, they might fly up. And we had great views of elegant tern sitting on this causeway over here when the tide was too high for them to get used to on the sandbanks. So a really good site. I think the rarity potential there is enormous, and it's just such a Strandfontein is huge, and you can spend a lot of time there. But Macasa you could probably do quite easily in an hour, depending on what birds you find. But it's a nice sort of contained site.
I think it's important to mention that it's obviously tidal, so you would want to. It's best to go there low tide. So you'd want as much sort of bank to be exposed as possible in the river. That's where you'll see higher numbers of birds.
I think what we've also noticed over the times that I've been there in the recent past is it's a very popular fishing spot, which I think adds to the safety of the area. So a lot of the fishermen will park their cars over here and walk down onto the beach, and they fish from the beach here. But as I said earlier, doing a seabird watch is actually quite nice. Lots of birds to see out at sea, and that's the Strandfontein area. Right. So just in terms of the birds, we don't have too many photos of the birds, but it's the common sort of waterfowl and flamingos and gulls and terns. This is the very showy bed sandpiper. You didn't need good photographic equipment to take a photograph of this bed sandpiper, Dave. Yeah, so a really good spot. I think in the years to come, a lot of the upcountry birders better have Macasa as a site on their Google Maps, just so they know how to get there fast from the airport. And interestingly, from the airport, it's probably no more than 20 minutes. Yeah. All right, and now I think let's get to another endemic rich site. And Dave, this is like one of my favorite places in the world, just in terms of the amazing birds that you get there. So this is the slope at Rooi Els, and we'll come back to a map of Rooi Els. This is actually a rock face called Hunclip, and this is the town of Pringle Bay. There's a little bay over here. It's a popular sort of holiday town. And to our back is the town of Rooi Els, and you tend to park your car, or you park your car on the Rooi Els side, and then walk along this road, which is it's basically a servitude. It's not a public access road. You can't drive your car on it, which I think is great.
It's good, yeah.
From a perspective of being a birder. And you can walk along Porter Drive. And this photo was taken, I'm going to do full disclosure. There's a lot of controversy now about birders accessing the rock jumpers on the slope, walking up the slope. It's become a hot topic over the last sort of couple of years. This photo is probably 10, maybe 12 years old. So back in the day when maybe it was a less sort of popular site, I did walk up the slope and take this photograph and get.
But I think as well, it wasn't well known that this is actually private property above the road. So
that's exactly the problem. I think the rock jumpers will be fine, but I think the landowners and rock jumpers and all the birds that live on these mountain slopes are, the fynbos is tough. You're not going to damage it by walking on the slope, but it's respect out of private property. Okay, so it's a bit further to go, but it's one of those sites where if you're traveling along this road, it's called Clarence Drive. It is definitely one of the most beautiful roads in the country.
Iconic drive.
It's an iconic drive, much like Chapman's Peak. And it's actually, in many ways, a more attractive drive and an easier drive because it isn't Vegas clogged with traffic. But in summer, there are some very popular beach spots along Clarence Drive, and you need to be aware that there's a lot of traffic. So it's not a spot where you're going to find a huge number of species, but the species you find there are amazing, and I'll quickly spin through those. So it's the key site in South Africa for Cape rock jumper. It's probably our most iconic endemic, I guess, and it's the most accessible site for rock jumper. If you want to find a rock jumper elsewhere, you're going to end up climbing mountains. Whereas Rooi Els, you can park your car, walk for 20 minutes, and you can see them from the road. So this bird was photographed literally standing on the road. I didn't have to walk up the slope.
That's a great point, Mike. I mean, so Cape rock jumper is traditionally a high altitude species, but between, I guess, you probably start getting them halfway along Clarence Drive, all the way around to sort of Beatty's Bay, Claymont, you get them at sea level, which is quite unusual. Yeah,
absolutely. We've actually had rock jumpers just outside Beatty's Bay, also at sea level. But I was in Elgin on the weekend, and I went for a mountain run, and we were at sort of 800 to 900 meters altitude to see rock jumpers. Right, so the other endemic that you'll get there, which is actually, it's not a great site for Victorins warbler because it's private property, and to get to the Victorins warblers, there's some restio sort of wetlands, and you need to get into those. There are far better sites in Stellenbosch, where veterans walk is more popular, but it's worth mentioning.
Did you take this photo from the road?
This photo was actually not taken at the site. You're not supposed to throw me under the bus. This was taken in Stellenbosch.
It's an amazing photo of a Victor's warbler, but compared to your others,
it's a very difficult bird to get a photograph of. So forgive the quality.
No, it's a great shot in the season.
And then ground woodpeckers. So ground woodpeckers, we all know the ground woodpecker adorns the cover of the Sasol 5. It's definitely just the most amazing endemic bird. They're not that easy to find at Rooi Els. I've not had them that easily, but the birding groups go there and they find.
They are there. I mean, I think ground woodpecker generally is they're often on the ground or around rocks, sort of feeding. They're a bit like rock jumpers when they're not calling. But when they're calling, you can just listen out for them.
And you'll see them in groups of 4 or 5 birds. And they do make a lot of noise, and they're very active. And
they also have a tendency that when they fly quite far. Whereas a rock jumper will just hop and never fly sort of big distances. Whereas woodies, you'll find it'll be a few hundred meters away, and then it'll fly a few hundred meters in. So they can be harder to pin down.
Maybe a point to make on finding rock jumpers, because I think a lot of people go to Rooi Els for rock jumpers because it's the most accessible site. I think there is a tendency for you to walk on that path and just pull your speaker out and play tape. And I think
you mustn't do that.
You mustn't do that. Not particularly not at that site, because it's a world famous site, and we want our visiting birders to see rock jumpers. And the more tape that gets played there, the more difficult it is to be assured of seeing them. So I think the best technique, and there are multiple families of rock jumpers.
Yeah, there are lots of them.
So as you walk along the road, if you don't find them in the first 200 meters, and the next 200 meters, you'll probably find them in the third 200 meters that you walk. So a little bit of patience. And then one maybe important point to make is, and you'll see this when we show them the map, it's a west-facing slope. So if you go to Rooi Els in midwinter at 9 o'clock in the morning, I can assure you you're going to be in shade, and you probably will still be in shade at 11:30. So if you want to see rock jumpers and the wind's not too strong there, an afternoon visit is actually just as good as early morning.
True.
Right, central rock thrush is another one of our endemics.
It's a beauty.
It's a lovely bird. This bird was photographed at the site there from the road. And they are just such great birds. It really is pretty, and obviously you need to just take care that you're not looking at a Cape rock thrush. So you can see the difference in the length of the grey on the breast.
I find that the Cape rock thrush is actually often perched on the telephone wire.
Yeah, as you park your car, you start your walk along Water Drive.
Whereas the sentinels are often on the sort of lower slopes on the rocks, hopping around. Yeah. And
then, Dave, will you just take us through the actual site and maybe talk about the strategy of birding at Rooi Els?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll also just say, Mike, I mean, it's one of your favorite sites, also a site that's very close to my heart. I obviously grew up in Kirstenbosch, but we also have spent the last 40 plus years in Betty's Bay. So this whole stretch of coastline is I'm very fond of it. And it's such an amazing area. We've got Mike and I have a friend, Tertius Close, who's been birding at this site twice.
Don't mention it.
He has seen Cape mountain leopard while birding at the site. I mean, that's how phenomenal this area is. It really is. You could bump into anything, but it just shows really just how special it is. So yeah, so Mike mentioned you would park your car where that red circle is, and you just basically walk along the road. The first section you'll hear things like greyback cisticola. You might see Cape sugarbird or a Cape rock thrush sitting on the wire.
Orange-breasted sunbird.
Orange-breasted sunbird. Yeah, I mean, I've actually walked this entire road not seeing Cape rock jumper, got back to the car and have Cape rock jumpers literally hopping around the car. So you can see them very close to where you park, but generally you need to walk at least halfway along that sort of green circle to start seeing them. And as you get there, you get things like yellow bishops or Cape bishops, and you'll hear Victor's warblers calling higher up the slope. And the best way to find or locate Cape rock jumper is to listen to the call.
Absolutely.
They often have a little contact call, which is quite subtle. It's not the song, sort of the alarm call which you hear. It's often just a very subtle contact call. Yeah. But if you know that, then you can find them quite easily.
Yeah, and I think it's a patience game in a way, and it does help to have a scope there. But I think most people that go there want to see rock jumpers close. and patience will give you good views of rock jumper.
Yeah. There used to be a nest site. It used to be a nest site for Rose eagle, but they've now just moved around the corner a little bit further up Clarence Drive. So you can see Rose eagle.
You often see them soaring over the ridges.
Exactly. Peregrine falcon as well. I've seen their rock kestrel. It's just a fantastic. I've also had Nicholson's pipit there as well. Yeah.
So one of the things that I've circled here is this is the proposed distillery. So there is an approval process to have an operating distillery there. So there's quite a lot of emotion about it. We're not going to get into that. But that is a good landmark. You generally don't need to go much beyond the distillery when you're looking for all the endemic species. It's and I think this shows you very clearly that what I was talking about in terms of the sun. The early morning sun shines from the east, and you can see this. This is a much more impressive mountain when you're standing underneath it than it looks in this photo. So just bear in mind, if you want to go there for nice sunny photographs, you need to go a bit later in the morning or maybe in the early evening.
And just a last comment about, I actually know 2 people who've seen Cape Mountain leopard while birding. The only reason they picked them up was because Varroa eagles were mobbing them.
Amazing.
So if you see Varroa eagles behaving in a quite an aggressive way, stooping on a particular site, look with your binoculars. There could well be a Cape Mountain leopard hiding somewhere.
I dream of that. All right, and what we wanted to do is just show you very close to Pringle Bay. So here is the Porter Drive. This is the Rock Jumper Road. No, I've got it wrong. Sorry, this is the Rock Jumper Road over here. So from Rooi Els, where you've parked your car, you just get back onto this very, very good quality road. I mean, you can see it's 14 minutes. It's a very pleasant drive. The scenery here is absolutely magnificent. And you drive down to the Stony Point Penguin Colony in Betty's Bay. And it's just it feels maybe a little bit touristy, but there's nothing touristy about seeing our wonderful African penguins. So this is a photo taken over the bay. I couldn't find a better one than this, but this is taken over the sort of the Walker Bay sort of area. So Hermanus and Betty's Bay are in this area. And the great birds that you see there, and it's such a quick detour to get a great bird like African penguin, our endemic bank cormorant, which is quite an endangered bird now. They're not that common, but it is almost a guaranteed site for bank cormorant.
Yeah.
And then obviously crown cormorant is another bird that's not that easy to find in all coastal spots. You know, Cape cormorant dominates most of the coastal cormorant sites. So it's a nice place to make sure you get crowned. And it just takes a bit of scanning through. You can get the 4 coastal cormorant species pretty easily.
Exactly. And in fact, I have a friend who often sea watches from there. He's seen really good seabirds from Stony Point as well. And it's just down the road from Harrow Porter. So if you wanted to pop into Harrow Porter, you could sort of do that quite easily as well as part of your day trip.
And it's such a beautiful area, and there's some amazing restaurants in Betty's Bay. And the Harrow Porter's got a wonderful coffee shop. So it's a good day trip, as we mentioned at the beginning. So I think those were our 4 key sites.
Yeah.
And I know there were some questions in the chat room about what sites people would like us to cover. There are a few that we haven't covered, I'm afraid. I think the one that sticks in my mind is Intaka. I did not include Intaka when I was thinking about what we should include, but it is a great site. You know, it's very close to the.
If you want to see Little Britain, I'd say it's the site.
So maybe just to tell those that don't know, it was part of the negotiations around the development of Century City. So when the developers were developing such a sort of industrial or a commercial heavy and residential heavy area, there was a commitment to do a wetland. And it's been amazingly done. There's a nice visitor center. And as Dave says, Little Britain is a key species. So we've got a few additional sites, and we're really not going to spend too much time. We've almost used our hour. I'm quite impressed that we haven't overshot by a long way, because Dave and I can spend a lot of time. So these are just, I think we've got 4 sites that people may be interested in. The first is sort of the Red Flay Dolphin Beach sort of complex, and I mentioned them a little bit earlier. So in this image over here, this is the Red Flay Pans. Over here is Dolphin Beach. It's a very well-known site for whiteback duck, which is not a common bird in the Western Cape. And as you can see, it's not a long drive. This was obviously snipped in early morning traffic hours. It's not 50 minutes. It's probably a 25-minute drive to get there. Dave, have you done a lot of birding at Braille Trail? I mean, obviously it's very well known for Wilson's phalarope. And there was a wonderful female that you and I twitched that one day, if you remember, at Dolphin Beach Pants.
I do remember that, Mike. I thought you were going to mention the other mentionable.
No, let's not mention unmentionable.
There was also a black skimmer seen at Red Flag. Red Flag is fantastic because it's a Cape Town managed reserve, so it's quite easy to there is access control. So you go inside, you pay a small fee, I think it's about 40 Rand, you park your car, and you can walk for about a kilometer onto this boardwalk, which Mike has got pictured here. I think that's a good friend of ours, Michael Mason.
And that was the long-toed lapwing
yes.
we had, I think, 2 years ago.
So there are a couple of hides you can walk to. It's a nice mix of, I guess, a bit of bush birding, open water, a bit of sort of wetland habitat. So it's a fantastic spot. It's actually also quite a well-known spot for marsh owl, which is quite unusual in Cape Town. Yeah. But in winter, it's a good spot for them.
Yeah, we've done a few evening vigils with a cold bear standing looking at the marsh. It's a good spot. So that's that whole Red Flag area. It would be wrong to do a webinar on Cape Town birding and not include the Red Flag complex. It's not a site that Dave and I know particularly well. We've got good friends who live very close by and know much better than we do. So maybe a bit of bias, but certainly some amazing birding there. And then very close to Red Flag and just a very quick drive on the R27 as you head towards Langebaan is the Kubrick Nature Reserve. And maybe just a quick pause to say the reason we haven't covered West Coast National Park is that BirdLife South Africa did a range of webinars on sandparks sites, and we know that was covered very well by our good friend Trevor. And so we didn't go that far north, but this is a very nice nature reserve for Strandfontein species, and I've sort of included a pic of a Cape Penby, but good for things like Black Harrier, which is an iconic sort of Strandfontein species. So really a nice place to go for a walk, if you can ignore the buzz of the power lines as they go from the Kubrick power station. But it's a really nice Strandfontein. You can see in that photo on the left, courtesy of Trevor, obviously. So yeah, Kubrick Nature Reserve is a nice one. And then Rondeflay, which kind of goes to the other side of the peninsula, which is right next to Sequoia Flay, and it might have been superfluous to include it. We could have maybe rolled it into one, but Red Flay is one of my favorite little reserves. You need only about an hour to walk the path. There's about 5 or 6 amazing hides. It's also water level dependent, but painted snipe, Balon's crake, there's a Goliath heron that's resident there at the moment. And so lots of really good birds at Rondeflay.
We've also got 2 very nice observation towers.
Yes.
So you get a very nice view of the reserve. And just a tip, if you get there, you can park outside, but if you just stop and ask the gate attendant to open their parking, you can actually park inside as well. So you do have that option.
And amazingly, there's no fee to pay.
Yeah, it's now free.
It's a free access site. And just 2 non-birds to mention, which are amazing animals. The one is Cape Dwarf chameleon. So once again, when you walk in the entrance gate, ask the wardens, I guess the game guys, where there might be Cape Dwarf chameleons. There's a big rest here right at the entrance, and they often are sitting on those. And then an amazing experience, if you go there sort of August, September, is the Western leopard toads. So it's a key breeding site for Western leopard toad, and when there's a chorus of Western leopard toads, it's the most incredible sound. It sounds like a big truck rumbling past. It's an amazing sound, and it rises in volume, and then it descends in volume, and then it goes quiet. What was that?
I thought you were going to mention the arum lily frogs.
Oh, that's another key species.
You should also check for the arum lilies for frogs.
It's a key site for arum lily frog, which is obviously one of our reed frogs. Right, so that's our third and second last site, and third last site. Got one more after this. We just included Silvermine Nature Reserve, and we're very wary of including a photo of the striped flufftail. It's a highly sensitive bird. We certainly don't intend to give any pins. It's a bird that requires an enormous amount of effort. If you want to see a striped flufftail, you're going to need your hiking boots, and you need to be patient. But it is a site where you get things like ground woodpecker. I've flushed while running up in Silvermine. I've flushed Fynbos button quail. So it's not a very easy place to bird because it's a high effort. To get up to the slopes, it's probably a 4 or 5K upward slope to get to things like striped flufftail, but they do call in sort of late winter and early spring. And this particular bird was photographed in striped flufftail in Dave. It was a shared life for you and I about 10 years ago, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And Mike, I think there was a question in the chat before we started about Cecilia Forest. That's another good spot you could actually pop in if you are going to silver mine. It's a great spot for raptors. It's always been very well known for chaffinch.
Yeah.
More recently, it's been well known for lesser honeyguide and brown-backed honeybird.
Absolutely.
It's also a site worth stopping at.
Yeah, and Takai, if you look in this map, Takai plantation is around about there, so you can combine it with a trip to silver mine. And then the last site, and this is really just, I think a lot of people will say they're coming out to Cape Town, they need chukka partridge on their list. And how do you get to Robben Island? It's pretty simple. Just very quickly, logistically, you just get on the Robben Island ferry. It takes you to the island. You get on one of the tourist buses and you travel around the island on the tourist bus. You do the tour. Chukka partridge now is a common bird on the island. It would be very unlucky not to see sort of coveys of chukkas. So it's a thing that I think a lot of birders will end up doing. It's not our favorite kind of birding. It's a plastic bird. I've done it, and it was really just to get on the list. It's a very pretty bird. There's no doubt about that. It's obviously also a key site for peafowl, Indian peafowl. So controversially, I'm going to say that I don't know why Robben Island peafowls are the only ones to tick. For those that want to do peafowl, it's become incredibly scarce. They're almost extinct on the island. And I think it's, if I'm going to say this controversially, Dave, and let's be controversial, I think it's all the older birders that have ticked it at Robben Island when it was a trash bird there. And now that the population is declining, they're saying, hang on a second, the only bird you can tick validly is peafowl on Robben Island, because they know that they aren't left anymore. So it's not a bird that we can catch up easily. Do you think that's too controversial?
No comment, Mike.
No comment.
No comments.
Okay. So I've ticked peafowl, but not in Robben Island. I've said it.
I think also just to add, if you are going to go to the effort of going to Robben Island, it's a very interesting tourist spot just for historical reasons. And it is a fascinating tour to do. But also en route on the ferry, you should look out for Sabine's Gull. You could also see the odd pelagic Usudi shearwater. Correct. In summer, maybe a Corey shearwater.
Our bird of the year, Cape Gannet.
And you also get a great view of Table Mountain, actually, as you cross the bay.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I would actually personally, I'm not a big lister, but I would rank it sort of first as a very interesting tourist spot. And then if you happen to be a birder with a list, then it's quite nice to check a partridge.
Absolutely. All right, so we've dealt with all the controversy, and that leaves us one more slide, which is just to say thank you to everyone for listening to us prattle on about our wonderful city. It's amazing. We're very proud of it. And if you're in Cape Town and you want to go birding, give us a shot. Very happy to help. Dave, thanks for joining me.
Cool. Thank you, Mike.
So, Andrew, I see your face is back up. I'll turn our camera on.
Yeah, if you don't mind, it'd be nice people can see you at the end. Yeah, I've taken the floor back from you guys. Thank you so much, Mike and Dave. It really was a fantastic way to kick off this new series on birding in our major cities. I foresee this series becoming the go-to reference for birders, both locally and foreign, traveling around South Africa, and many people are going to use this presentation as a trip planning tool in future, I'm sure. It was packed with information and also accompanied by some impeccable photography, I think mostly from Mike's lens. So thank you for putting all of that effort in. It was great to have the two of you on together, sharing your stories and anecdotes and your tips and tricks for each of the sites. I do encourage everyone to go look up Mike and Dave's Better Birding webinar series and go check those out. There's more where this came from, and also just a quick shout out to the Cape Bird Club. I saw Priscilla Beaton and Mel Tripp in the chat box. I know Mike's also involved with their committees, and their website is also a great repository for birding site information in and around the Cape. So if you are traveling down to Cape Town and looking for information on birds, certainly have a watch back of this presentation on our YouTube channel and go have a look at the Cape Bird Club website. I would like to apologize to all of our Afrikaans viewers for Mike's butchering of the pronunciation of Strandfontein. It's Strandfontein, Mike, and so please forgive him for that. I think you've put in enough effort to earn some forgiveness for that and your tinfoil hat conspiracy theories. I'll throw that in there as well. Mike did warn me that he might be a bit controversial tonight. So yeah, all's fair in love and war. Also, a quick shout out to Martin Jasper in the chat room. I thought there was a really top comment. They said it's quite funny at Strandfontein. You struggle to find a toilet at the sewage works. So I thought that was quite worth repeating. So thanks, Marty, for chipping in there. Before we get to some questions, I would like to remind everyone to please participate in the post-webinar survey, which will pop up when you exit the webinar. It'll just take you 2 minutes to fill in. And next week, we're going to be recapping the incredible Flock to Marion voyage from a few weeks ago. Our communications manager, Andy Wassung, was on board capturing some of the highlights, and all of Melissa, Christina, and myself will be joining him on a walk down memory lane. So if you were on board and would like to relive this once-in-a-lifetime experience, or even if you weren't able to join us, but you're eager to see why such a fuss has been made about the trip, then do join us next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Mike and Dave, before we get to some questions and I set up our closing slides to roll, perhaps I could ask each of you just to reflect on your Flock to Marion experiences and maybe share your favorite moment or sighting from the trip to whet people's appetites.
Sorry, we muted just for fear of dogs barking in the background. Yeah, Andrew, you should have given us a little bit more warning on that, because there were too many moments. I think, Dave, should I go first?
Dive in.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew, I didn't know that we were going to go until the ship actually departed the harbour. I was even not sure we were going to get out of that little gap as the southeasters started blowing. So I kept my expectations low. But even if I'd had like super high expectations, I think I would have been absolutely blown away. It's such a privilege to have been able to go. I mean, there's so few people that have the opportunity to go to the deep Southern Ocean. My highlight moment, I think, obviously the moments we were approaching Marion. So when we could see Prince Edward Island before the mist unfortunately came in, just seeing the island and starting to see the diversity of sea life and those amazing, to have 15 wandering albatrosses in the wake of the boat. So that was for me sort of like a moment's highlight. But I think my top birds, Tristan albatross was amazing, and obviously such an endangered species. But I loved seeing blue petrel, and Dave and I shared a room, and we shared a blue petrel moment just before dinner on that albatross Thursday, where we had a blue petrel sort of flying outside our window for probably half an hour, and we enjoyed it immensely. I don't know if I've stolen your favorite moment of the trip. Dave.
No. I mean, Andrew, I mean, it sort of following the last flock we did. It's up there with my top sort of birding experiences ever. It's just so unique. You know, often if you want to see really interesting or iconic birds, you have to endure a bit of pain. And you've got to go to the extremes of the earth to really see something. But you're watching these amazing albatrosses and seabirds the entire day, but then you sort of retreating to this lap of luxury where everything is laid on. So it's just an amazing experience. Obviously, it's an amazing wildlife experience, but then you're on this cruise ship, so it's very comfortable. And there's the whole social side as well. You're on board with 2,000 like-minded individuals. So it just ticks all the boxes. It really was fantastic.
Yeah, so hopefully that's inspired some people to join us next week. Dave, on your point about the whole birding community being on board, I had a friend, Brian Moritz, who's a very well-known herpetologist at UWC. I saw him at the Common Cuckoo Twitch just before flock, and he said if that ship goes down, he's suddenly going to be vaulted into the top 50 birders in South Africa. And he's a hobbyist birder. He's pretty good, but his list's not quite comparable to the top echelon. So yeah, it was certainly a great experience, and I encourage everyone to come have a listen next week. There's some really nice photos and videos and anecdotes to share with everyone. So on to the questions from tonight's webinar. I'm going to start right with the first one, which was asked when you were going through Kirstenbosch, and Norman Locke wanted to know from you two whether you can use your Sandparks wildcard to get access to Kirstenbosch.
No, you can't.
Unfortunately not.
You can't. You need a Botanical Society card, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's the straight answer. And if you are planning to go to Harold Porter, that botanical card can count as that garden as well. Yes. So if you're going to be doing a few visits, it will very quickly pay itself off. So do look into that Botanical Society membership. And of course, it's a good group to support with your membership as well. So yeah, that's the answer to that, Norman. Thanks for the question. Janet Bloom wanted to know, I'm not sure which site she's referring to here. I think it's the Mukasa site that you dealt with. She says, I know you listed your view of the safety of the site, but what is the situation in terms of driving to the sites, the ones that are considered not 100% safe? Is the drive safe? She basically wants to know.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, certainly to get to Strandfontein, Kirstenbosch is not an issue. It's through very sort of affluent areas, I guess you could say. To get to Strandfontein, it's through sections of sort of Ottery and the suburb of Strandfontein, and you know, sort of at a glance, it doesn't look as savory as we maybe are used to, but I've never had a problem. There's always quite a lot of traffic, a lot of people, and it's generally fine. Macasa is relatively the same, and as I said in the presentation, getting from the end to Macasa, it's probably less than 3 kilometers, and it's on a very open road. It's not like
quite a quiet road.
Yeah, it's a quiet road, and it's surrounded by sort of open plots, and I think I've never felt uncomfortable driving to either Strandfontein or Macasa.
Yeah, I think the general rule applies anywhere in South Africa is just be aware. There's nowhere that's 100% safe, and just use your common sense and your keep your wits about you, basically. Jane Doherty would like to know, at Macasa, where does one park and where does one drive versus walk around that particular site?
I wouldn't walk. I would just drive around the pans. So I think where Mike indicated that sort of southeastern section at the river, I would drive to that point and drive, because you'd have to drive through the pans to get there. So a bit like Strandfontein, I would bird from your car as you get to that point, and then at that point you can get out of your car. If you've got a scope, you can use that to watch the birds on the river. But I wouldn't walk around. I would just stick to your car. You can certainly bird around your car, but I wouldn't walk on foot.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Last question I've got here, just a reminder, everyone, if you do have questions, pop them in the Q&A box quickly before we finish. But Klaus Schmidt would like to know how seasonality affects the birding at the sites you've discussed in the Cape. And I think for international viewers, particularly discussing how it differs with the rest of the country might be useful.
Okay, so the two endemic sites, so Kirstenbosch and Rooi Els, not that negatively at all. So all our endemic species are available in summer, obviously, in both seasons, and sometimes in winter they might even be easier to find. So Cape Town, late winter, early spring is a great time, because that's when birds are starting to think about breeding and collecting nesting material, and that's when they're active and calling. So the endemic sites are better in late winter, early spring. Late summer is not a great time for our endemic birds. They don't tend to be that active. I think Strandfontein and Macasa are definitely better in the summer season. So I can't see myself going to Macasa in midwinter, because I think you won't have that many waders. The terns are not as prolific, and your rarity potential is relatively low. So it's better to spend time at places where endemic birds are better in the winter periods.
Great. I see another question coming in from Francis Hemp asking, is Kubrick still closed to the public? I guess with COVID it must have been.
You've caught us unawares. I don't know. I apologize. I guess
I would recommend phoning ahead of time.
Yeah.
Just to check.
Yeah. If anyone has been recently, maybe pop it in the chat box, just so we can get an answer to that. But otherwise, yeah, phoning ahead is always a good idea, or popping a query on one of the various Western Cape or Cape Town birding groups on Facebook is also not a bad idea, or one of the Telegram groups even. Please don't put it on the Red Bird Alert group. Please put it on the general chat group. Otherwise, I'll get in trouble for unnecessary traffic. I don't see any other questions. So, Dave and Mike, we're going to...
There was one question I noticed in the chat room. I'll just quickly answer it. There's a question about the Silvermine Vera's eagles. So there was a nesting pair of Vera eagles in Silvermine. So you had to hike up to what we call Nutter Peak, and then you'd see them on the sort of Chapman's Peak side. They as far as I understand, that particular pair has relocated its nest to the 12 Apostles. So if you know where the 12 Apostles are, where the hotel is, so if you drive from sort of Camps Bay to Llandudno, that mountain chain on your left-hand side as you drive to Sewerage, the nest is there now. And we've got a very good mate, Garrett, who atlases in that pentad, and he always goes along that drive and scopes and generally picks up the Veres eagle on that particular site. And I think if I'm not mistaken, it is the same. It's been confirmed as the same pair that was at Silvermine.
Great, thanks for picking that up, Mike. And I will be forwarding the chat to you gentlemen afterwards. There's plenty of wonderful praise for the effort that you guys put in and the quality of the presentation. Like I say, it was a really great way to kick off the series. I couldn't think of any better way than to do it with Cape Town. I think I've been in Joburg for 2.5 years, but Cape Town still has my heart. And as Mike says, I think the birding down there is something special, and you two have done a great job of bringing that to people in their homes tonight. So thanks for joining Conservation Conversations and all the effort you guys put in.
Absolute pleasure. It was wonderful to be doing this again, I guess.
Thanks for the opportunity, Andrew.
Pleasure, gents. Thanks, everyone. And thanks for joining us tonight to all the audience. Thanks to Toyota for being this month's sponsor of Conservation Conversations. And we hope to see you all here next week on Tuesday at 7 p.m. to go through a walk down memory lane of Flock to Marry and highlights. I'm going to wrap that up now, and thanks and good night to Mike and Dave and to everyone else in the audience.
Cheers.
Cheers.